I'm Lorraine Terrell. I'm the Director of Communications for the School of Arts and Sciences. I just wanted to welcome you and thank you for coming out this afternoon. This is the second of a lunchtime series that, as you know, is called Knowledge by the Slice. This is sponsored by the School of Arts and Sciences, and we are offering this series just to give people from the Penn community who would not ordinarily have a chance to hear from faculty in the school, get a chance to meet people, hear them, hear about their various interesting areas of expertise. Today we're going to be getting some discussion on film, some opinions about both Oscar nominations and beyond. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for Q&A, so please feel free to throw your comments out there. Our panelists today, starting with Tim Corrigan. He's a professor of English and Cinema Studies. Second panelist is Meta Mazaj. She is a lecturer in the Cinema Studies program, and we're also joined by Decherney, who is Associate Professor of English and Cinema Studies. So I'll hand things over to them, and I'll just now please keep your eye out for our March event. We'll be having some faculty from the Poli-Sci department talk about some of the implications of the Civil War. So enjoy the panel.
So please come sit down. We have seat fillers who are going to come in if you don't take the seats quickly. So yes, we all teach in the Cinema Studies program. I want to encourage you just very quickly to go to the website, take a look, read more about the major and the minor, but also about some of the events coming up. We actually have tons of events. There's a screening or guest speaker almost every night on campus, sponsored by Cinema Studies. Many screenings this month. And just I'll mention one event, Roger Graff, who's a really famous and terrific documentary filmmaker, will be here on the 25th, screening some of his clips from his films and having a Q&A. So believe it or not, we never quite know what to think about the Oscars as film scholars, although we do have an Oscar poll every year. And if you really are going to put money in your own poll, Tim is actually the sort of the general leader. Somehow,
and I will give you the formula about how to win.
All right.
Meta did win last year, and I have won before, though I actually cheat, which I'll tell you about in a little while. So just very briefly, I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Hollywood and the Cultural Elite. And I do tell the stories about Hollywood's relationship with different cultural institutions, museums, universities, government agencies. And I tell the story about the pre-Oscars, how the Oscars began. The Oscars began in 1929, and the Oscars given out for 3 years of performances at the time, 3 years of films. But a few years before that, 2 years before, they had something very much similar to the Oscars held at Harvard University. And the question is, why did the Oscars start to begin with? So and I think it's all about labor relations in the industry. In 1926, there was something called the Studio Basic Agreement, and all of the below-the-line, what are called below-the-line workers, the electricians, the gaffers, all became unionized. And the studios were really afraid that the more powerful talent would become unionized. And they were trying to find a way, I think, to stave off the unionization. And one of the things they did was to start this award ceremony to make the talent seem more like talent, like artists, rather than like laborers. And that's part of what the Harvard award ceremony was about. And then they started the Academy of Motion Pictures, whose job really is to collectively negotiate between talent and the studios. It's been called the producers' union. Right? It protected the studios against the demands of the talent. And it actually worked. It did stave off unionization until the Depression. And so the question today is, well, what is the function of the Oscars? Tim, I wonder if you guys have talked about what the function is of the Oscars, the kind of social function.
I do, but I'm not sure if it's fair to have me go early because I have such a cynical view of it. But you might as well hear it up front. I mean, I think the cynical view is the Oscars are about money. They're about promotion. They're about the industry. And I think there are variations on what we see all the time in terms of 10 best lists or the greatest movies of the year, the greatest movies of the century, and so forth and so on. This, of course, takes place every year. And I think a very simple way to look at it in terms of that context of the finances that drive it is, first of all, I don't have the exact figures on me right now, but I think something like the bump in revenues is, depending on the major awards, about 20%. immediately after that. Of course, there's a big bump when you get nominated to begin with. But in the larger context of contemporary movies, if one steps back from the Oscars for just a minute and considers the fact that theatrical distribution itself, for every movie, major movie, is now pretty much about creating a buzz. It's about promotion for the DVD sales. It's really not about getting people into the theaters, even for movies that aren't anywhere near the Oscar list. But you can follow that logic and realize that with an Oscar, getting nominated for an Oscar at all, is a huge marketing and promotion point. And that seems to me to be what drives it. And again, I have a fairly cynical view, and the movie on this list that I think is by far the best movie on the list is not going to win much, and it's the smallest movie, and it has the least amount of money attached to it, which is Winter's Bone.
I might just want to add to this that it's probably useful to see, as Tim pointed this out, it's about value adding, and in that way, Oscars is not so much an independent phenomenon, but we can see it together in a kind of a network with maybe the A-list festivals and awards such as, you know, SAG and BAFTA, and it's almost like a race, so that a group of movies that picks up, that gets an early buzz, that usually Cannes is kind of a bouncing point. And I know festivals are different than Oscars, and you know there's a still distinction between art cinema and you know, Hollywood cinema, but I think they still go in a way together, and you can kind of see the films that are picking up the buzz and that are picking up awards at other festivals and other awards, and then Oscars kind of are a culmination of it. And I think this has been happening to King's Speech, which, you know, not long ago was still comparable in the race, or was equal in the race to Social Network, and they were still debating, oh, is it going to be Social Network, King's Speech? And now, after the SAG and BAFTA and everything else, apparently King's Speech is way ahead. So I think it's not, Oscar's not an isolated phenomenon, but really goes hand in hand with all these other events that are all in the business of creating buzz and adding value to the film, which I think probably has little to do with the film itself.
I mean, that path from the film festivals, and of course there are hundreds and hundreds of them, some more prestigious than others, to the award ceremonies like the Oscars is, as Meta pointed out, I think, you know, really in some ways a central pathway in the movie industry today, the world industry, and certainly Hollywood industry. Yeah. And you look at the, I mean, you look at the newspapers, and it's not that producers and studios sit back and just keep their fingers crossed. There's a lot of money behind, or not so far behind the scenes, promoting these movies for the Oscar, and when they pick up a nomination, continuing to advertise that with the hope of, I think, influencing how those votes go.
Yeah, no, and I think this has always been true, that the Oscars have been about marketing and promotion, but things changed quite a bit in the late 80s and with independent film, I think. And Miramax was really the first company to very aggressively understand the value of the Oscars. So a recent study suggests that when a film's nominated, it adds $20 million to their box office, and if it wins, it adds another 15. And so it makes sense for companies like Miramax to start to put $1 or $2 million into promoting a film. Shakespeare in Love was a big milestone. They spent $1.5 million to promote it just for the Oscars. You know, it actually financially made sense. It wasn't just about getting the award. And you know, Weinstein showed that they really still understand this. I mean, they have free films that are up this year. Yeah. One thing I always wonder is, though, who's watching the Oscars? Is it really entertainment?
You mean the ceremonies themselves?
The ceremony themselves. It does incredibly well. It wins Emmys. What do you guys think? Is it actually entertainment?
Yeah, it's a reality show. You know, long before you know, American's Idol. This was our idol show. I think people love to see people win, love to see people lose. You get to see it all there, and that's been around for a while too.
In some ways, I think it's a little bit like a hockey game. That no one will go, you go hoping for the fight, not for the game, and you're waiting for the sort of, you know,
you're looking for the outrageous speech,
right?
Or you're looking for Bjork to show up with a swan around her neck.
So this year it's James Franco and Anne Hathaway. Right? Yes, so trying. Right, no, trying to get a younger demographic, trying to make it not a sort of traditional stand-up variety show with musicals. Okay, so let's actually get into it. Who's going to win?
Well, should we? Do you want to hear our winners, or should we open it up? I mean,
Peter, can you just say a couple things about the process, how the film gets nominated, just before we get to the...
Yeah, so I don't know if people know about this. So it's done by the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences. The Academy has about 6,000 members. There are people who work in the industry. It's actually kind of an exclusive club. A few people nominate you. It's like getting into a country club, right? A few people nominate you, then you're voted on, and you get in. And the categories have slightly different rules, but in general, people who are part of a specific division, so editors, would then nominate films for the best editing, and then they're allowed to vote in that category for best editing, and then everyone's allowed to vote for best picture. And so then there's slightly different rules for different categories. So in documentary category, for example, you have to have seen every film in order to vote for any films. You would hope that that was a rule in all the categories, but I'm not sure that it is. One thing that I find surprising about the Oscars that people don't seem to know is that most people who vote for the Oscars watch the films on video. They get screeners, and they haven't seen the films theatrically. And so when they're voting on the best movie, and it was maybe 2 years ago, whenever Jon Stewart was the host, there was a lot of talk throughout about trying to preserve the movie theater experience and how you can't appreciate films on video or on an iPhone. And yet, ironically, everyone in that room who was voting for the movies, most of them had seen the films on video. This is also, people started to know about this because of the screener controversies, where screeners were getting out and they started to have encryption and watermarks so they could be traced. And I have to say, in the days before that, they did flow more freely, and I used to get a lot of screeners from friends, but that doesn't happen as much anymore.
And the voice of cynicism will say here too is, once you get out of the major categories, best picture, best actor, when you get down to what I consider the more interesting categories, like foreign films or documentaries, they vote without even seeing most of those films. So, or at least that's Mr. Cynic's position. Anyway, you want to pick some questions?
Okay, so why don't we open it up?
Some questions, observations?
Well, Mr. Cynicism.
Oh, please.
No, I was just, I was thinking when you were saying that you were cynical about the Oscars and, kind of like an advertising tool to get it out there, but how else would you get things out there? And I think one of the reasons that I have seen some more quality films over the year and not, Hollywood chick flick, is because of the Oscar buzz. And it does open you up to different things, but how else would you get the message out there?
I mean, you're right to qualify that, because the movies are a business, and you have to promote and market movies, just like you have to promote and market books. So I'm really not against that, and as we know, particularly if you're a cinema studies major in this room, there are lots of pathways through which you market and promote movies, virally, newspapers, word of mouth, whatever, trailers and so forth. And in a way, I think this is just one very glamorous version of that in a way. And I have nothing against it, and it's quite efficient. But I guess where my cynicism comes in is that does in some ways cast some doubt on whether we're looking at the best picture when we hear the winner, or when we're looking at the best performance in some ways. And as I said, I've this year actually seen quite a few of these, and it seems to me hands down that this movie I mentioned before, Winter's Bone, is far more interesting than the ones that will win. So if you haven't seen that, that would be my recommendation. But again, I don't fault the industry for using this as a very, very efficient way to market and promote a movie. I just think it has less to do with quality necessarily than with efficient marketing.
Yeah, although interestingly, it's not the most successful films that tend to win. They're often smaller films. They're the Academy Award style films. It's already become a kind of a genre, right? The Miramax style film, It's not independent films. It's this indie wood films, if you will.
Well, and I would say, I mean, and here's my secret formula to winning the Oscar pool, is don't vote with your head. Don't say, you know, this is the movie I love most. Look at the context, the social context for America right now, from a lot of different angles. What are the issues? What are people interested in? And that's going to give you a leg up on what's likely to win. I mean, what Peter was saying before is, was it last year? It was, you know, husband and wife showdown with Avatar and Hurt Locker. And, you know, actually I think Avatar was by far, or excuse me, Hurt Locker was by far the better film. But, you know, that issue, the film itself became in some ways secondary to this, the drama about Bigelow and Cameron, it seems to me. So I always sort of frame the particular competition in terms of other social or cultural issues or just rumors that surround movies. See if that works.
Yeah, the other thing you might see if you read the New York Times is the advertisements for films that have been nominated. But if you read the trade press, that's all they're about for months. And every year it's longer, and there's more money spent. And so there's this internal dialogue within the industry in which they try to sell a film and give this backstory. And it's a little like watching the Olympics, where every year there's more and more about the athletes and you know, less about the competition. And we care more about the backstory. And we're hoping, you know, that one skater is going to, you know, take out the knees of another skater, or right. Those are the kind of stories you get in Hollywood as well, right? Have they, you know, has someone missold a film or misrepresented their film, and that really actually does affect the voting.
There's a question in the back here.
Yeah, now that the field for Best Picture has expanded to 10, do you think that that's made it more competitive, or do you think that's kind of leveled the playing field with more popular movies like Toy Story 3 and then Winter's Bone?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that's why it was done. It was actually done to, I think, to include more blockbuster films, which weren't getting nominations. And if there is this huge bump, $20 million bump for a film that just being nominated, well, this is a help to the industry as well. But I also think because smaller films were starting to become fill up the nomination list, I think this is a way of trying to include more viewers as well, more fans who would see Toy Story 3, but you know, or less likely to have seen Winter's Bone.
And it is not a new thing, right? This was originally what the setup was. So they had anywhere between 8 and 12 nominees until I think 1943 was the last year. That's the year that Casablanca won. Was the last year that had this wide, you know, spectrum of best picture, and then they stopped doing it. So they're saying we're going back to our roots. Really, this is where we started, and at the same time, kind of widening it, opening it up to films that would otherwise be overlooked, and that includes, you know, animation. So for last year was Up, I believe, right, and this year's Toy Story. I think if we only had top 5, I'm not sure, right, that something like that would have been included. So, you know, but it's indicative of something else as well, right? Not just the fact that it's expanded, but you know, what the role of animation in the movie industry, which has changed dramatically.
And I think too, it gets to the point where, to your point, it's evaluated. Is it their due? Is it their time? They've been, you know, denied the award in past years. For example, Sandra Bullock last year for Best Actress. Yeah. I don't know.
Or yeah, I mean, I think, or you know, Martin Scorsese being ignored when he's making some of the greatest films in the history of cinema, and then given an award for a good movie, but it's almost, your time is due. You've waited long enough. We've ignored you.
And it's those extra filming. This is what Peter was talking about. I think Sandra Bullock, you know, it was just perfect timing with everything that was going on in her personal life. Mm-hmm. And it might just might be the case this year with Natalie Portman, where, again, if you see her in a race with Annette Bening, who I think deserves a role and is due for it, right? She's really been around and she's fantastic. But it's, you know, Natalie Portman, the fact that she plays a crazy chick, which Hollywood tends to love, so to speak. Yeah, and, you know, impending motherhood and all these things just conflate. So there's all this extra filmic, all these buzz and stories that accumulate around the film that end up making a difference.
And Natalie Portman will win.
Yeah, so all that's true, that it's about gaming the system and advertising and these extra filmic stories. But on the other hand, there are certain kinds of films that just tend to do well. Like The King's Speech is an Oscar film, right? That's its genre, if there is a genre.
Yes, I completely, it's just the perfect combination of historical drama with, horror story about personal, handicap that you need to overcome.
And it's
this
British.
Idea, and it's British, and the idea that, British royalty that we're all perversely fascinated with, that you can see it as an underdog, right? Something that is privileged and, you want to identify with, but it's an underdog. And it's just it's a perfect formula, and it also, points to a trend of small independent film that starts from nowhere, with a relatively small budget, just taking off, which is what has happened for the past few years. Hurt Locker last year, and there were probably 5 years before, and starting with something like Boys Don't Cry, that this trend has just continued, where you have an indie film with seemingly not a lot of potential exploding in the end.
And the my other pick for Best Picture, it's going to be Social Network, I think, will win, which I think is too bad, because it's a nice story. It's a really interesting story. Was it Time Magazine's Person of the Year or something? But I don't see it as much of a movie. At least from my perspective, to look at something that combines really creative or inventive cinematography, acting, editing, sound, or whatever, would describe the best movie in a way. And this is a very good movie. It's a very competent movie. It's a good script. But it doesn't stand out to me as something that is an absolutely interesting or innovative film in any sense. But it will win, because technology is here.
So I wonder if this confusion is because of the list of 10 movies. I'm very confused about that. Can you look back? Why 10 movies and not 4? And not 5 as are the categories? It's really because they want to afford everyone? It's really because they want to give class to everyone? Because for us, it's very confusing. Oh, maybe they're very confused.
Wait, why is it confusing?
Well.
What's confusing about
The
it?
10 movies.
Is too many to choose from?
Too many to choose from.
I don't think so.
It's like, is it democracy or is
It's exposure. It's exposure. I think being nominated creates
But why don't
exposure.
you go for movies and not for best performance and not for best cinematography?
They will do that.
No, it's a little bit like the transition from the production code to the rating system. So the production code used to have a one-size-fits-all model, and they wanted films that were going to reach the mass audience, right, as many people as possible. With the rating system, and they were failing for a lot of reasons. Like they weren't getting an adult audience. European films were starting to, and independent films were starting to pick up a lot of the market. And so the move to 10 films as, okay, we can include a much wider range of films. And so it's no longer just films that fit this narrow Oscar category, but bigger blockbusters, some smaller films. And then the idea that I think to bring in more of an audience. Mm-hmm. People that care about different kinds of films are now going to be invested in the awards segment.
Or to quote a film scholar that we all know of here, whose formula is follow the money. Just follow the money. And, again, Mr. Cynicism speaks here, but instead of, what was it before? How many did we have nominated for Best Picture before? 8? 5. You've got now double the films which can cash in on an Oscar nomination. And the Academy Awards are an industry event. And being able to advertise your film as nominated for Best Picture is money immediately. Yes?
I read Winter's Bone as a comedy because of the slapstick segments in the swamp, and also because it has a happy ending. So that's a case where if you see it with the right audience, you realize how funny it is in the swamp. But I wonder if you could say more about why you like it so much, what you think is innovative about it.
I think it's a fantastic story. for one thing. You know, I don't want to say too much in case people haven't seen it, but that's interesting, slapstick swamp sequence, because anyone who has seen it, it's a sort of grotesquely funny sequence if you see it that way. But I think it combines for me all of those different dimensions of a film, of a movie that come together, which you rarely see sort of come together in that way. The acting in it is stupendous, I think. The script is really tight and very beautiful. And it may very well win that award for adapted screenplay, because I think you know, the script and the story are so original and powerful. And the cinematography is very tight, very sharp, very bare. And I do think it frankly, manages to tell a tale about a woman, and it is by a woman director, that is really moving and very contemporary. But overall, what I like about it most is the way that in some ways orchestrates all these different dimensions that we used to associate with a good movie to produce, for me, an extremely original film.
Did you see The Fighter?
I did see The Fighter.
What did you guys think of that?
I'll let somebody else. Have you guys seen it?
I actually didn't see The Fighter.
I thought The Fighter was good. I mean, it was good. It was, again, I mean, talking about movies, sometimes the problem is if you haven't seen it, I don't want to ruin it for you. Because it seems to me that's a movie that is a really fine fighter movie in the tradition of Rocky and other fight movies. The end seems to me to be a complete sellout, because it tries to be a tough, gritty film that reveals this kind of underside of a Boston working class family, but it gives up on it completely at the end, I feel. But I don't want to ruin it for people. Though that may, I guess that's nominated for Best Actor too, in that, isn't he? Or Supporting Actor? Supporting Actor, yeah. And he's extremely good in that, I think.
And I think that's one of the tensions of evaluating movies. And you talked earlier about don't vote for the movie that you enjoyed or you liked.
Or that you think's
there's
best.
The enjoyment.
That you think's best.
Okay. Because there's the enjoyment factor in a movie, and then there's like
Yeah.
the really quality
Sure.
factors, and they're not always the same.
No, and all of those are important in your experience, and those are the most important things. I'm just saying, you know, if you have, you know, your paycheck on one of these movies, don't bet in terms of I really liked it or I thought it was the greatest, because, you know, as Meta was saying too, I think that there are all of these different kinds of cultural and social pressures or influences that come into play when people sit down and actually vote. Some of them as a consequence of how the film's been marketed. Some of them as a consequence of the buzz they created, you know, around the characters or the filmmaker. And so those reactions are the most important. But in terms of winning the Oscar, I think one has to, in some ways, look at it in a broader context.
And I think there's always a bottom line, too, that all of these films that are nominated, and definitely the ones that end up winning, will not deviate from the conventions in a major way. You know, so they'll poke it, they'll do interesting things, but you will never, ever in an Oscar see anything that is subversive or unconventional. So I had an interesting discussion with my class last semester on romantic comedy about The Kids Are All Right. We talked about the genre, and they all kind of hailed or started talking about that film as an example of, you know, genre bending. That's a genre that has been so rigid, right, in terms of formula. It just keeps repeating the same formula. And I said, you know, it doesn't. When I saw it, I was hugely disappointed, because it takes the story that is politically correct and embeds within it and makes central a heterosexual relationship, without which I don't think the film would end up being on the spectrum, on the visible spectrum at all. And I think, you know, as far as I'm concerned, it spoils the film completely. It's just a ridiculous aspect of the film that you know, this lesbian couple or married, have lived together for years and years and years and have brought up beautiful children, you know, the minute that she sees a sperm donor, she's on her knees. What? Right? And you know, the one sexual scene that you see between them is done in an extremely grotesque, comical, it's like a cartoon manner. In the meantime, all the scenes that you see between her and, you know, this sperm donor that she falls for are really hot. And the whole center of the film revolves around that. So you think, wow, great, let's applaud. Here's a film that finally breaks, right, the convention and then does something very new. And in fact, it just manages to go, you know, around that very carefully. So I think, you know, it's on the list of best picture, right?
Picture, yeah.
And I can bet you, without that, it would not, it wouldn't be anywhere. Not only, I mean, it would achieve no commercial success, despite the brilliant performances and everything else that it has going for it that is really great.
I'm just picking up on what Ben was saying. From a film historian's perspective, almost none of the films we teach have ever won an Academy Award. It's very rare that any film that is important to film history, to film historians, you know, is an Academy Award winner, precisely for this reason, that the awards tend to celebrate films that are in the mainstream. So they're not films that are breaking new ground, that we can later see as the beginning of some kind of new genre or new period. You know, they're films that are popular, that adhere to conventions, you know, that can make everyone happy. And so they're actually the films, strangely, that get released on video more quickly than others, but they're the films that get taught the least and written about the least.
Does that fall apart when you look at other categories, like best documentary? Do you teach the minutes?
Well, best documentary is a fairly recent category, I think, isn't it? I'm not sure how many years, but no, I think that, you know, those categories too, you often get screened out some of the really interesting things that are being made. Although I will say, if there's any justice in the world, Exit Through the Gift Shop should win that this year. But if it does, then of course the big question is, will Banksy arrive in formal wear with a hoodie on? So that will be worth staying up and watching for. But no, I mean, I think in terms of documentaries, and to a lesser extent too with foreign films, you still have, I think, some of the commercial pressures and influences which shape the choices. I can remember, how many years ago was it? About 5 years ago, the Enron was nominated for Best Documentary, as with that Penguin movie. What was it? Yes. March of the Penguins. And, you know, and I thought there was no contest there. But of course the Penguins won.
But then Gibney wins the next year.
And then Gibney wins the next year for Taxi to the Dark Side, which is a good documentary. I don't think it's nearly as good as Enron, but to go back to, you know, My Little Formula, that was a hot issue.
But they were not penguins.
Well, they were penguins. I'm sure there were winged migrations or something going on too at that time. So yeah, I think, you know, when you get into the smaller categories, you know, including, you know, screenplays and so forth, I think those commercial pressures lessen to a certain extent, but not entirely.
An interesting category to look at is a foreign film always, right? Because you think that that stands out and it does not have to represent Hollywood. But of course it always does, right? So you want to get just the right dose of the exotic and the other, but translated and subtitled in a way that you can understand. So you will never have a film nominated that, you know, that you can visually, forget thematically, but visually translate into the conventional formula that we're used to. So it's, you know, even for a category like that you think don't relies on all this extra cinematic, you know, shebang that goes on around in the industry. They're not going to end up making that much money anyway, but it's still, it fits into that general formula quite well.
And actually, until recently, foreign films tended to be almost a kind of lifetime achievement award. So De Sica would get a film, would get an Academy Award, or Fellini, yeah, someone who was already well known and had an established record. I don't know exactly when it changes, but now it's the foreign films tend to be into films that sort of reach into the mainstream and beyond the kind of narrow art house category.
There's a question.
Well, comment and also a question. Just in response to the kids all right, I actually disagree because I think that it's our perspective here is not the perspective of someone in like the Midwest, for instance, who's seeing this movie and it's sort of the same device that they use with Modern Family, which is to use a very conventional format and sort of get into your head about what is or is not. I mean, it's a broader question, right, about gay marriage and all these other things, but I actually do think it is, in its own way, political and subversive because it might be easier maybe for some people to absorb something when it's presented that way than in other ways. That's not the only way you present it, but I do think the way they acted, I thought was, I like the way that neither of them really played the wife. I mean, there are other, you can argue about certain things, but I think that it does have it.
No, I agree, I completely agree, and I think you do, that these aspects are very, very important, but when it comes to that bottom line question, does it break,
genre, right?
Yes, does it break the basic formula? It doesn't, you know, and we really tried hard to find a film that does that has achieved commercial success. Now there's a whole array of films, right, that have been targeted to niche audiences, you know, that do that really center on a homosexual relationship. But those that have achieved mainstream success have not done that, you know, so it's, you know, look at something like My Best Friend's Wedding or something like that, you know, so you have a gay character, but it's shown as an accessory, like a handbag, you know. Same, well, they have to be with one of them has to die in the end. You know, you will not see them walking off into the horizon holding hands. So it's unsuccessful. It doesn't work.
But
so,
just a quick question, just I forget. Do you guys have theories in terms of why the Academy seems to hate Christopher Nolan? Because they nominate all his movies, basically. Arguably, the reason they expanded to 10 was because Dark Knight wasn't nominated and it created this big...
Yeah, that's the greatest compliment you could get, right? Historically, it's always the directors who are nominated but never win who go on to be considered the great directors.
Yeah,
Scorsese. Right? Yeah, so that's the greatest. Yeah, that's the greatest compliment you
but
can get.
But he's not nominated for Best Director, which is I think outrageous.
Yeah, it's the second time, and the movie's nominated, so it just doesn't make sense to me how.
Yeah, it's actually.
No, the real sign that you're making good films that really have lasting power is that you know you're not getting the awards, but you'll get the Lifetime Achievement Award. Although they always again wait for those, and they think, okay, now it's time to give someone an award, and they always sort of those become the most controversial, and they always you know underguess it. So Elie Kazan, like, oh, everyone's forgotten about Elie Kazan. We can finally give him an award, but it's not true, right? It becomes controversial. Like you know Jean-Luc Godard, no one is going to care anymore about Godard. And they gave him an award this year. He didn't show up, and you know there were huge controversies about whether or not his not attending was an anti-Semitic gesture. So just when they think controversy is finally 20, 40 years behind us, they're wrong. Come back.
And that's the best reason to watch the controversy. Find out who's going to make the outrageous speech.
So can we play the game here about your predictions?
Yeah. So I think yeah. So Meta and I have little kids, so we don't get out to the movies as much as Tim. So Tim's actually
big kids
Tim's handicapped by having seen so many films. He misses the bigger picture.
But I hope you've heard from my cynical formula. You don't have to see the films to know what's going to win. I mean that's so old-fashioned.
So normally in the pool I do cheat, which is and how do I do that? I don't go into the future, which would be then I really put money down on it. No, I use the Hollywood Stock Exchange. It's crowdsourced. So the Hollywood Stock Exchange allows people to buy shares in movies and their success and in the awards. And they have these prediction markets for lots of things, presidential elections. And the Hollywood Stock Exchange has been pretty good about guessing the winners for the last 5 or 6 years. But having not looked at the Hollywood Stock Exchange, which I was planning to do this morning but never did, I have to actually go with my own predictions. I actually think this is the year that an animated feature is really going to win. both animated feature and Best Picture.
Wow.
I think the industry is going to recognize that that animation has completely changed. It's changed the industry and it's changed as its own genre. There was no Academy Award for Best Animated Picture until 2001. For the main reason is because Disney would have won every year. And now, it's not just Pixar and DreamWorks, but other studios are branching out and making animated films. And the technology has evolved to a point where they're making just incredible films that really are comparable emotional levels, technical levels to live action films. But also, I think there's a good reason that animated films are consistently better than live action films. There are fewer of them. They're actually, when we took the odds, they shouldn't be as successful as they are. And I think the reason is that they take a very long time to make. It takes 5-6 years to make an animated film. And when you take that long, they take time to hone the film, to really figure out what they're doing, and really craft a film that's going to be successful. And consistently, animated films have saved the industry over the last few years. Box office trends are changing, and it's a few huge blockbusters that make all the difference about whether or not it's a good year for the industry or a bad year. And consistently, animated films are the ones that continue to keep Hollywood, making money. So I think that's what we reward.
So you're not going to offer your winners?
So Toy Story?
So he's
Toy
a
Story.
Toy Story?
Toy Story.
Okay.
I thought it was the King's Speech.
And what did I say for Best Picture? The Social Network, even though that saddens me. But
What about Best Actor?
Best Actor is going to be, where is that category? Here.
Colin Firth.
Again, it could be Colin Firth, but James Franco has been in the news so much. He's getting a PhD at Yale, blah, 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 blah. He's going to win.
Is he going to give himself the award, though?
Yes.
I think that's too awkward.
Oh, yeah, he's done.
It's happened before, but it's awkward. No, I think it's Colin Firth because he stuttered.
Yeah, and he's
They love
British.
that.
Natalie Portman is going to win Best Actor.
Yeah.
Natalie Portman will win Best Actor.
Just crazy enough, yeah.
Christian Bale will win Best Supporting Actor.
Taking notes?
We say,
I think Fincher will win directing.
no, I disagree with that. I think, where is that?
Directing.
No, I think Aronofsky, they're going to give Aronofsky for Black Swan. Black Swan.
I thought David Fincher for Social Network.
One of those two, definitely.
Cinematography, I think it will be Inception,
Inception.
because
I
it's
think
so
so.
crazy. Yeah.
Also a consolation prize.
Yeah.
The better films will get this lower. The awards that come earlier in the evening.
Here's the kind of interesting category to choose. Best foreign film, foreign language film. Because this is one of those categories where I know that the voters, half of them don't see these films. So they're going to, You got Beautiful from Mexico, which is down at the Ritz right now, I think. Dogtooth from Greece. In a Better World from Denmark. Incendies from Canada. And Outside the Law from Algeria. I've only seen 2 of these, and I will say it's going to be Algeria, Outside the Law. I've never seen it, but Algeria's in the news.
It's a little too controversial, though.
All right.
Yeah, I would say Beautiful, just because it's
It's in the theaters. Yeah.
And has actors people recognize.
Okay, what about adapted screenplay and original screenplay?
I think The Social Network has to get the adapted screenplay.
Ugh.
It is an amazing screenplay, on par with 30 great 30s screwball comedy screenplays.
Here's one where I'm violating my own rule and say that Winter's Bone will win that category, because it should win. It should win.
I feel like that's the original screenplay, Another Year. This is the only nomination, and this goes what we were saying, Tim, that the films that you see that are best on the list usually only end up with one nomination, and I think the best here are Another Year, which I think was just, it's an incredible film, and it hasn't been getting a lot of buzz. We saw it in Cannes, Nicola, and I think it's the best thing we've seen in Cannes overall. It's just a beautiful film. That's just a second. And A Blue Valentine, also, I think has only one nomination. I think it's by far it stands out as one of the best.
So you'll say
the
another
list.
year will win original screenplay?
I want it to win, yeah, but I'm ambivalent about
I think
that.
The Kids Are All Right will win Best Original Screenplay because, again, I think Meta's right. It's daring enough. It breaks a few taboos, but in some ways this becomes kind of a consolation prize because they don't want to get too daring with this award.
Do you think it's right to have, it's like this concept of God bless America all the time, America God bless the world, sorry. But why don't we put the foreign movie with the best movie category? Why this distinction? Why there are...
Because they have to be American productions.
God bless America? Because
No, I mean, to win an Academy Award, it has to be an a U.S. production,
Okay,
which is a hazy category now.
And it's
with all-
becoming hazier, and especially with the past few years with the Mexican directors like Iñárritu and what's his name, the Pan's Labyrinth.
Total? Total?
Yeah, well, they're such co-productions and they're so international.
Yeah,
And I think last year's actually one of them was nominated for best. Which one was it? It was nominated for Best Picture, and it was just like, was it Penn's Landlord or something? Babel? Was it Babel?
But you know,
It was just like
I mean,
beautiful.
many
the
films
King's
on the list.
Speech, you wouldn't at first glance think that's an American production,
exactly.
Yeah, well,
but it
it's-
is.
I mean, many films here are partly funded with international money anyway. You know, that foreign rights are sold to begin with, or they're supported by funds through ICM or even DreamWorks that also have international financing. And so, yeah, it gets more and more difficult to tell what's an American picture. The rules are partly about where they open and which theaters they play in.
I'm wondering, now that we have firmly established that Oscars are basically money catering to the very average American bear, is there any festival, any kind of cinematic competition that actually values cinema above money?
Oh, I spoke like an Italian. No, there are. I mean, there are. I mean, Venice is pretty good.
Berlin.
I don't know. I mean, I think that they're, and you know, don't get me wrong. I mean, I know I sounded a little bit over the top in my cynicism here. I don't think that they're catering. I think they're identifying what are either the proven commercial successes or the desired commercial successes. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just don't think that that immediately equates to the best movie or the best performance. I mean, the movie industry, movie making, is a very complex activity. And so, you know, it's certainly, the commercial part of it is very important. And I think we just keep our eye on that. But there are hundreds and hundreds of festivals, some more famous than others, Cannes, Venice, Toronto. Some give awards, some don't. A lot don't. They become in some ways places where you just create a buzz, which is the award in itself. I think it's in some ways easy to identify the top festivals in terms of quality and the way they exhibit films, easier than to say these ones identify the great movies. So for instance, you know, Sundance was for so long the place where you would see really good cutting edge, usually indie films. Toronto remains one of the great festivals because of the kinds of variety. And what you'll see, Venice as well. Rotterdam is one of my favorite festivals as well. What these other festivals often have that I like, that is just outside the scope of the Oscars, is they have a large global perspective on the movies. So it's really not what's the blockbuster, but what's the best film from Belgium, or what's the best film from Spain this year too. That there's I think there's a leveler playing field in these other festivals.
Yeah, they have different functions. So things like Cannes, Sundance, Toronto are all there. They're actually markets where people go to buy films. And they're more commercial than almost every other
The winners are not in this list. I mean,
of those festivals.
of Cannes, the winners of Venice, Summer, Coppola is not in this list.
See, the festival as an event, it is so large, it is so broad, and those, especially the A-list festival that depend on the publicity and the celebrity machinery, there's a huge discrepancy between what gets covered, right, and what creates buzz, and what you actually get to see and what the festival itself exposes. I think those are two different things, you know. So even something like Cannes, because of all the role of the celebrity and the glitz and the glamour, that completely eclipses what the festival actually offers in terms of programming. So if you're there to see the films, right, which nobody is, we are, that's why everybody's pushing us away. If you're there to see the films, it's an incredible variety and richness, you know, from all over the world. But, you know, like 90% of people there are either there to buy, right, they're buyers, or they're there for glamour. They want to, you know, be close to the red carpet and see Kate Blanchett or whatever. So I think there's two different issues.
So it's interesting that this illusion, despite the product is the same, namely the film, they are completely different. It seems like a festival and also the Academy motion picture can communicate.
Well, I mean, I think they do in the sense that Meta said before, is that festivals often become this sort of preliminary buzz that gets attention, that hopefully generates some sort of Oscar nomination, at least for American.
Yeah.
There's a question.
One last question, or maybe two last questions?
Yeah.
What's wrong with comedies? It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they used to get Best Picture a lot more than they do now. So are they not as good now, or is the Academy more sophisticated, or what's going on?
Anyone have a theory?
No, I don't know how to answer that, except, you know, to my sort of pat answer is that, you know, I think genres and different genres respond to the times.
Well, when's the last time you saw a really good comedy, though?
I like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yeah.
Okay, that's several years ago.
Yeah.
And that can get me.
And The Kids Are All Right is really a kind of, you know, a comedy, a romantic comedy in a certain sort of way. I mean, if that's what you mean in terms of the sort of generic description, not just the sort of laughs, but right. And I do think genres really do, more than anything else, respond to the currents in life in this particular year, day, and so forth.
And there's a great Will Ferrell musical a few years ago where he said the comedian is the saddest person at the Oscars because they're not represented. And there was an acknowledgement that that's true. I'm not exactly sure why, you know, larger social context, but it's definitely true.
Yeah, and I really think it has a lot to do with the labeling of the genre, right? So if the Oscars, like Peter said, tries to kind of cross over into the art cinema, I mean, it's commercial film, commercial success, but you know, art cinema, then comedy is kind of excluded, just by definition, almost. I mean, I don't think that it should be the case, and it does the genre justice, right? But stereotype about the genre. It's not serious. We like depressing and
right.
crying and stuttering or crazy.
Last question, yeah,
I just
Catherine.
want to speak to that for a second. Bill Murray gave a really funny speech a couple of years ago, I think, about why they, you guys remember it? He might have even been presenting. He was the year he was supposed to get it for Lost in Translation, and he lost the award. And he said this really funny speech about kind of just making, like, it's so easy to do comedy. You know, the whole thing was like, oh, it's so easy to do comedy when, and he was clearly speaking to it's actually much easier, at least some actors think, to do drama, you know, those chew it up emotive roles than to really make comedy work.
Yeah, and you know, I think that, you know, awards, they tend to want to award high seriousness. You know, that an award should be highly serious. There shouldn't be too many laughs because it'll look trivial in that way. I think that there's a little bit of that going on in there. Last question? Yeah.
You kind of agreed that a lot of times the movie that ends up winning is maybe the most promoted film of the year. In recent history, can you remember kind of, in your opinion, the worst, like where they got really wrong, where it was actually a really horrible movie?
Oh, wow. I'd have to be reminded.
Here's the thing, who really remembers? It has an initial bump, right? People go out to see the movie because they think they missed something. But 2 years from now, no one remembers which films were nominated, which films actually won. Yeah.
Do you have something in mind? Because, like a really bad...
You were talking about Shakespeare in Love earlier.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Saving Private Ryan was nominated that year, and, you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm not the biggest Spielberg fan, but I thought that was a really well-done movie. So in my mind, that was kind of a year that they might have gotten it wrong. But,
well, that was the year that Shakespeare in Love won?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. I actually like Shakespeare in Love quite a bit. So was happy about that. You know, I would be hard pressed to sort of run down the winners of the last 10 years. I just, the best pictures and so forth.
I think ordinary people be reachable.
Yeah, now that is a huge injustice. That's a huge injustice.
But they have tried to kind of go away from, you know, since the Titanic, right? It's almost like there's a little tendency
the
to go
Titanic
away
one, right?
from the spectacle.
That would be my vote.
Like a
for
pure
the biggest misstep in the history of the movies, the Titanic.
But you can see it as, you know, Avatar, right? As possibly another contemporary version of a Titanic losing to Hurt Locker, you know. It's such I think quite an indication of a trend that maybe you don't want to go for spectacle just for spectacle's sake, even though it might be the commercial blockbuster.
We will see. Well, good luck. I hope you all win the pool.